ask a follow-up question on that? Because I heard, recently a bunch of tech entrepreneurs basically told the government, y'all need to do something about AI regulations and policy, because right now it's the Wild Wild West. And so I'm curious, if you guys know of any substantive efforts going on right now, U.S. government, European government, to develop some sort of guidelines around AI.
I'm happy to jump in. This is my life. So I would encourage everyone in this room to just write down the Digital Service Act out of the European Union. Just read up on it, because it's going to set trends for the next 20 years as far as tech policy is concerned. So, quick crash course. The EU typically is ahead of the world when it comes down to tech policy. So generally what we see is countries like the US comply over time. So if you've been watching carefully here in the United States, because our government, federalist system, California just recently passed a law called the Age Appropriate Design Code, which sets standards for how tech companies have to comply to protect young people, like the folks sitting over there in the corner. AI, to the point that was made, is still the Wild West, but what we are seeing is that the Digital Service Act at least provides some buffers around what needs to happen within AI, but it's not answering some of those big questions around child safety, for example. If we create an artificial intelligence reality where misinformation can exist, and it's not proportionately controlled, and it disproportionately impacts young people from a certain economic background, who's liable in that situation? Is it the private citizen? Is it the tech company? Is it the government? That's where we're kind of seeing the finger pointing issue. So what we're probably going to see is a lot like you're already seeing now. If you've paid attention to the news, a lot of companies, one that I currently work for was just in Congress. It's going to be a lot of litigation in order to get the outcomes that we need, because we're seeing federal governments not producing legislation to the point. So long story short, the legislation is lacking. And so I would say, for your own edification, it's important to understand how these platforms work, do reading into what's happening in the EU, for example, as a touch point. I would say that.
And then also start to ask ourselves, why is it just the EU and the US?
Yeah.
It's global, right? A global environment. There are other countries and governments and political systems who are involved in this and should be involved. We have this thing that's called the global north and the global south, right? Well, and then there's the differences between the two. But we all know it's just like the black and the white dichotomy, right? Like what's good versus what's bad. So I think we just need to start asking ourselves these questions about why, and how then are these two governments influencing, or these two systems, these two institutions influencing what we're experiencing, right? Tech policy is huge, but yes, I think those are great points.
And on that note, can we give our panelists a round of applause?
Oh, yeah.
We got to 28% of what I thought we were going to get for this, because I understand we have time for a few audience questions. So does 3 sound reasonable, Mr. Newman? Or should we go?
We are here for y'all, with y'all, by virtue of y'all, right? So to the extent that it feels comfortable, y'all have questions, I think that that's okay, that the panelists are willing, will answer those. So take it away.
Cool. So I'll do the questions and I'll end it for the networking session, and then we can continue the questions. For the folks that came in, welcome. Sorry that my back is to you, all need to reorient. So questions for our panelists? Yes.
I have a curious question.
Sorry. The teacher in me. So audience Q&A. We got a few check-ins that will make this super helpful and hella productive. Community is important to me, and in order for us to build that, there are a few tips that I feel like will make it smooth. When you ask your question, make sure you ask loud enough for the mic to hear you, because I think there will be people watching this later as interested and involved as we are today in this room. So ask it loud enough for the camera to hear you. 2, do not be afraid to introduce yourself to the panelists in the room. There is a reason that you're here. We do not necessarily have time to introduce everybody out loud for the panel, but we will get to it. But I want to make sure that as you all answer questions, orient us. My name is Robert, I'm an artist, and some of those things you said earlier are important for me. This is why. And then question, it don't gotta be all of that. But last but not least, we are here again as a resource for this room. We're here in conversation. You all saw how serious and authentic the panel was. As they were talking, the panelists were taking notes from each other. This is what the conversation is about. So ask away. Those are my details. Get back to it. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. So hi everyone.
Hello.
My name is Mariana, aka DJ Sajo. I'm not gonna talk. Well, it leads into music. How do you guys feel about AI recreating all these sounds? Lately we've seen these folks who are using AI to create Drake or Kanye and all this other stuff. And I feel like, as a person who loves music and all that good stuff, does AI have the space to be in the music world, or is it, I'm gonna just keep it open ended, but like, do they have the, that space to be in there? Okay, I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, with AI, you think it's related to text, visuals, and audio. And so the innovations are happening kind of along those streams. So it's definitely going to impact the music industry. I've heard songs that were supposed to be by Kanye, but somebody just recreated his voice, right? So I don't know. I haven't thought through the implications of that. Of course, like if Kanye didn't do the song or Drake didn't do the song, they'll say I didn't do the song, and then people know it's basically a fake song. But they still might like the song, I don't know. And does that hurt? Does that then hurt their market? I don't know. There still are just a lot of legal things to think through. But I think that's why we haven't seen much happen yet, because it's so complex and no one really knows how things are going to play out. So they're kind of waiting to for litigation to happen to really put anchors in the sand. So I think in the next year or two, we'll probably see a lot of interesting cases come up, and probably in court, about artists, suing other people for doing things in their name, artists, claiming credit for something that they didn't actually create, all this sort of, people who are just, I guess, trying to make a buck or trying to take advantage of the system. They will be there. They'll always be there, and you'll see some crazy stuff. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
I think it goes into duality. Because I don't know if you are familiar with an animation called Carol and Tuesday. It's set about 1,000 years into the future on Mars, where half of Earth is mildly destroyed in their wars, but they're living a great life and they're using AI, and the entire program is actually about music. AI is writing their music, they're creating vocal cords specifically for every single person who decides to be a musician. They're making songs just for their voice. On top of that, it's such a weird thing that original music happens that it creates such a wild scope. So it goes into the hand of, do we want to maintain original music and keep that as a focal point within our community, or are we allowing something else to take over and tell us how we should sing and what are the best notes for us to hit, as opposed to creation?
I wonder how artists who actually create music feel about that. Can you tell us? Lily is an artist who
Hi,
has
everyone.
music out. Y'all should stream her stuff.
My name is Lily. I'm an artist, a singer-songwriter. I've always been a writer, but since COVID, I've kind of navigated into singer-songwriter. I do find it interesting. I often do play devil's advocate, so I see both sides of everything. When it comes to, let's say, as you mentioned, there are certain songs that people are like, oh, I wonder how this artist would sound. I heard Brianna's AI version of music, which was really, really interesting. I love it when I use it. I would probably for sure use ChatGPT just because I do a lot of things just as an individual, I'm not signed. I don't really work with other people aside from the artists that, you know, I do features with. Again, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm like the perfect guinea pig to do anything, but I also see how it's just like, I don't feel like it's as authentic as it should be. Again, I do everything by myself, so I see how I would kind of feel a way about, you know, is it really you? But yeah, that's just my take on it.
I have a question for you, Lily. How would you feel if someone took one of your songs and ChatGPT'd it for their voice?
No. No. I don't think I would even, because I was gonna say, I don't feel like I would look at it as them even like doing a cover to my song. I don't feel like it's not the same, it really doesn't hold the same weight as it being like a cover or remix. Them using technology to generate my song, but with their voice,
It brings us back to copyright laws, right? And what that looks like and what that means. But
I'd like to add to that. My name is Edo. I'm also a musician, producer. Know a couple of people here. Ex-Atlantic Records, ex-Snapchat, so I'm also in the tech space as well. And AI was something that at Snapchat that they were building in the background, and it just implemented into the Snapchat update. So you open Snapchat now, you'll see an AI that can talk to you, just like ChatGPT and all the things. I have two questions though. As we continue to go through this evolution of artificial intelligence technology, do you believe policy has the power to stifle that evolution? Because private companies inside America, private companies inside the UK, no matter where you go, those are the companies that we see. But what about companies in India? What about companies in Nigeria? What about companies in Australia that are creating these technologies without any policy, without any holds barred? Is there a possibility to stop intelligence that's greater than ours, that thinks faster and processes faster than us? Is policy going to be able to stop that?
yes, long story short, whether we like it or not, policy can't stop it. Absolutely. Which is why I said it's important for us. I actually mentioned this to Ron that I want to think through this idea and this concept of what it looks like to create policy for creators, right? Because that's what we do at TikTok, right? Like, we're telling people what parameters their art needs to function in order to be seen, right? And I think that, please don't get me fired on this camera, but I do think that that's something that we have to start thinking about. I think the answer to your question is yes, but we can do it responsibly where it doesn't stop creativity and it doesn't stop the creative process, but it enables it. It makes it better. It makes it stronger, right? It widens the guardrails. Like anything else, we have to have. Do we have to have rules? Maybe not. I don't think we do. In a utopian world, I don't think we have to have rules, but we live in a world where rules, norms, laws govern the way that we move and what we believe, right? And so I think that we can do that responsibly and we can do that ethically with the right group of people in the room, right? And with the right policymakers there. And so I think those are questions that I ask myself on a daily. I write policy for our global platform. I'm not just based in one region. And so I'm oftentimes chatting with different people in different regions, asking them, give me more about what's in your region. What do social cultural norms look like? Actually, I was just on a call with someone in Nigeria. What does that look like there, right? What should I be considering? But you have to have people in these spaces who think like that in order to make it ethical.
I mean, to kind of build on that point too, I mean, the elephant in the room to our earlier point is you see legislation coming out of the EU and the US, right? And so if you use colonialism as a teacher, right?
That's what I'm saying, that pressure is going to be from top down.
Right, so are we legislatively colonizing the way in which these creative spaces can actually develop and function? So I think your question's an interesting one. And I think for me, it's going to come down to what countries decide to press against the global West, right? And so I think that a lot of the conversations we're seeing now politically, between Asian countries and the global West is interesting because there is legislation being developed in countries vis-a-vis China, right? But is that a problem? Is it actually opening up creativity? Is it suppressing it? We don't really know because the conversation isn't being allowed to be had because it's being framed as like a deficit.
Right.
But I think it's an interesting question. I think within the next 10 years, it's kind of happened already, but like the global majority is shifting as far as power. Let's just acknowledge it. Globalization is not a real thing, people. So as we're beginning to see these shifts, I'm curious to see what legislation, especially in the tech space,